So last week, Jez, we're like, could Donald Trump win the Nobel Prize?
It wasn't an unreasonable consideration.
But it was a pretty firm no. It went to someone else.
It did.
It was fantastic.
But Donald Trump has still been defined as a winner this week.
It's almost like he
and he's
did
been
win.
calling himself the winner, and he's dominated the headlines. There's been more headlines about him than there have been about the Palestinian people and about the actual Nobel Peace Prize winner.
And the actual winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, María Corina Machado, got a call from Donald Trump congratulating her. And then she tweets and says it's due to, the people of Venezuela, where she is a fighter for democracy. And also thanks who, Jez? Who does she thank? Donald Trump.
It's quite an extraordinary turn of events. I've had a few interesting conversations this week, just with friends and family and stuff. People saying, are we liking Donald Trump now? Like, people are in this kind of weird headspace.
Yes.
He's done something quite good, possibly.
Potentially spectacular, but few caveats, Jez, which we need to talk about. I'm Julia Baird, and we're on Gadigal Land.
And I'm Jeremy Fernandez. This is Not Stupid, where we talk about the news of the week and the stuff that's going up and down your feeds. There's lots to talk about again this week, Jules.
Yeah, the stuff that's confusing you like nothing else.
Not just me.
Yeah, we're all confused. Let's just marinate in confusion together. That could be like the subtitle of our pod. Jez, I've been massively distracted this week by a series I've been working on for the ABC called The Boyers.
We have to talk about
We're going to
this.
get back to that.
Yeah.
But I want you to talk me through. I've seen the images, I've seen the elation, I've seen the concern, I've seen Trump, Netanyahu. Talk me through what's happened with the release of the hostages and the celebrations and the hope that we're now seeing.
You'd have to have a heart of stone not to feel for those families who've been waiting out in the open in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, waiting for their loved ones to come home and watching these live feeds and, moment by moment updates, watching the Red Cross vehicles go in to collect the survivors, the remaining 20 people who were being held hostage alive in Gaza, being brought back into Israel. They were handed over to the Israeli military, given medical checks, and then gradually released to their families. And the elation, people were literally screaming with joy, erupting in all sorts of emotion, laughter, tears. And you'd have to feel for them. This has been a horrific 738 days for them. And hope for those people had diminished significantly over time.
And pretty terrible stories about what had happened in captivity.
Yeah. People described not being given food at all, measly amounts of food, like half a cup's worth.
And rotten food,
Rotten food,
being in tunnels.
being tortured in tunnels, not seeing daylight for most of the last 2 years, only bits of filtered daylight, being transported underground, not knowing where they were going, being injured, carrying infections with them for long periods of time. Even water was scarce. The water that they did receive was contaminated, it was dirty.
Ugh, it's just horror.
Possibly undrinkable, but that's all they had.
Yeah.
So horrific conditions that the hostages were held in. But this week, a real sign of hope, and I think, a lot of people have taken heart that maybe this conflict has reached a new stage if it's not completely over. Donald Trump has characterised this as the war being over.
Yeah.
Same for Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the irony here is that Benjamin Netanyahu, along with right-wing members of his government, have steadfastly refused to accept any end to the war until a much greater mission was complete, right?
Yeah,
Because bear in mind, earlier in the year, they were talking about transforming Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. So to reach this point is actually quite remarkable, one that I certainly didn't see coming this soon.
Yeah. But we have also the Palestinian people, 2,000.
Yeah.
Palestinians being returned.
I think it was 1,700 Palestinians.
Okay.
So detainees being held by the Israelis in Israeli prisons, being returned to their families. And similarly, they've also described horrific conditions of torture, not receiving food. So the elation for them of returning to their families has been enormous. But what we are left with now is two leaders, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, declaring that this war is over. Other countries in the regions like Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, pledging their support and their relationship with Hamas to help mitigate the prospect of all this re-erupting. And then we've got right-wing members of the Israeli government saying, because the release of the dead hostages has slowed down, we've only had 4 released, I think, on Monday, and then another 4 meant to be coming at some stage now.
A lot less than they
And the
promised.
remaining, 20 hostages, so 28 in total, coming at some stage in the future. Now, we don't know whether we are to believe Hamas that they are having difficulty locating some of those bodies, whether Hamas is using those
plausible,
bodies. Absolutely
yes.
plausible.
But they made the promise.
They did.
So why make that?
The thing is, though, they haven't been a party to the peace deal.
Yeah.
They didn't attend the signing of that peace deal in Sharm el-Sheikh with all those other countries involved. Israel wasn't at the signing of that peace deal. So that makes me doubt, and a lot of analysts doubt, how much of this can we trust is secure for now when you've got forces in Israel quite keen to resume that mission of clearing out Gaza.
And it feels so tense, doesn't it, in terms of that? But I want to talk about kind of a couple of skirmishes, a couple of problems that we've seen since and where the fault lines might lie. But the question is there a point, is this a point where we can truly have some kind of hope that at least been movement, at least there's a ceasefire? I mean, Donald Trump saying, some people say this has been going on thousands of years, some people say 500 years, but whatever it is, we've kind of done it. Could this be as significant as that? And if so, do we pause to celebrate that, Jez?
There was a really interesting thing. So Donald Trump spoke to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, a couple of days ago. I watched the whole speech. You're welcome.
Tell us about it.
It was rambling, the usual Donald Trump fashion. Occasionally you could tell he was going back to the auto cue and reading the words that had been written for him. And they certainly sounded more presidential. But then he'd go off on these ramblings. It went for more than an hour. And it struck me that he was congratulating himself a lot. He spoke about the Department of War more than he spoke about the Palestinian people. He spoke about Barack Obama, about Iran, about the potential to make business deals more than he did about the Palestinian people.
Okay, firstly, that's true to form. Remember that time that I went to that meeting and he said the beauty of me is...
Yes.
Which I've always wanted to start off a conversation with someone with that phrase. The beauty of me is... Anyway, we know that he's self-referential. What I find fascinating about that is framing it in economic terms to say there can be rebuilding here. And war on so many levels is daft and brutal and senseless. And on one level in which it's senseless is that it's incredibly expensive.
Yes.
So is that something as a businessman that he can really drive home? Like...
One of the points he kept ramming home during that speech to the Knesset was that America makes the best weapons and we gave Israel the best weapons and you used our weapons to win this war, to which he got a standing ovation. He got repeated standing ovations during that speech. This was a victory, as he framed it, of American weaponry and of Israeli use of that weaponry.
Again, how's Gaza going to be? Gazans
this is exactly it,
about
right?
That. Right?
And then so his message, the one time he did mention the Palestinian people, was to say to them, it's time to turn away from the hate, the political opposition to Israel, and to embrace development. So this was all about kind of, and obviously anyone who's been in a conflict situation knows it's not quite so clear-cut.
No.
And the people are not the government is not the people necessarily. So it was a really interesting framing because I thought it spoke so much about victory while just a few kilometres away in Gaza, the place is in rubble. People are dead. 67,000 families at least don't get to have that homecoming.
They'll never be coming home, no.
And I feel for them too.
Yeah.
I feel for the Israelis who don't get their loved ones home. They're coming home in body bags or are still in Gaza as we record this.
And the situation in Gaza, still a humanitarian disaster, still lacking basic
What does
resources.
give me hope, I will say this, what does give me hope is the countries that have come on board with this, countries from all over the world, including Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, who've come on board and said, we want to help, we want this peace to last. And I take heart from the global momentum to keep the peace, and I hope that what that materialises in is support for the people of Gaza to have the right to self-determine, for Israel to exist safely, and for peace to last.
Do you think, you mentioned earlier people saying Trump is a very polarising figure, I'd say, and those who are not a fan of his and have seen him as kind of, like pugilistic and like fond of militaristic solutions in his own country. So Maureen Dowd writes a column about the Nobel Peace Prize saying, he's interested in peace in the rest of the world, but not here. He's bringing in the troops to Portland. He's bringing them into California. Do you think there's going to be a strangeness around crediting him for it if it does work? And if so, is that a shortcoming?
I don't know the answer to this, but I've had this conversation with so many people this week who kind of go, I don't know what to think now, because he's a problematic character, right? And he's divisive. And there is so much he has done, not only around the world, but domestically, that will have long-term consequences for America. And here's this one good thing.
Well, USAID, look at the impact of that, and the deaths have been around the world at not helping the most vulnerable.
Yeah, and the long-term effect of those funding cuts by the US on global health is going to be massive, and we're going to only see that materialise 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
With things like HIV, tuberculosis rates skyrocketing.
Yeah.
But then to look at this, a war that we had, I think most people had expected would keep going indefinitely, to provide that hope and to have had a role in that, he does perhaps deserve some credit for that, particularly if it lasts.
Okay, this is what I want to talk about. Now, already we've had reports of Gazans being fired at in the north by Israeli troops. We've already had, can you talk me through the context of that as well? And also we've had reports of Hamas shooting people who they believe have, in public, who they believe have been collaborating with Israelis.
Yeah, what this speaks to is the security situation in Gaza is far from resolved, and there is a vacuum that's been left that as Israeli forces have started to withdraw, they are still substantially present in the Gaza Strip, but as they've started to withdraw, there are these vacuums, and Hamas is keen to reassert its authority, and it's going after people, militias who are opposed to Hamas, people that Hamas says have been assisting the Israelis and publicly executing them. In addition to that, there has been somewhere between 7 and 9 people who've been killed by Israeli rocket fire, which the Israeli military has described as necessary because those people had crossed a line of control. Impossible for us to verify this at this stage from this distance. As is so much in Gaza. There are very few foreign journalists there, but this is what we're hearing from journalists and eyewitnesses in Gaza. 7 to 9 people.
Still waiting to verify, very conscious that things are very...
This would constitute possibly a breach of the peace deal, and which is why so many analysts are saying even this peace deal that was signed in Sharm el-Sheikh between these various countries, it is so fragile, it is so lacking in detail, and there have already been occurrences of this sort of rocket fire, the slow return of those bodies, which were all meant to have been dealt with on Monday, not having proceeded yet. All these constitute small breaches and put that peace deal at risk. This is why everyone's feeling so tense about it.
And isn't the pivotal point about Hamas disarming?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How on earth do you enforce that?
Yeah. We're kind of on tenterhooks.
But hopeful, Jules.
But there is definitely some hope. It has been quite a stunning turnaround.
Because I've wondered in my head, if Donald Trump is motivated by ego and the pursuit of a Nobel Peace Prize and has spoken repeatedly about being worthy of the Peace Prize, whether, if he didn't get it this year, whether he might be putting it up for consideration next year.
Yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah. Okay, Jez, let us take a moment to think about the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, because she is an astonishing woman. She's currently in hiding for her life. She's had threats on her life for many, many years. She won the opposition in Venezuela. She won the right to stand for the opposition in the last election. But the government said, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Her name is María Corina Machado. She was given the prize, said the chairman of the Nobel, for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transitioning from dictatorship to democracy. Despite serious threats of her life, she's remained in the country, which is a really big deal, a choice that has inspired millions. So she's been called the Iron Lady, or the Lady of Steel, which is a classic trope for women in positions of power, often used actually for women on the right, not for women on the left, just because she's got such guts and determination. As she said when she got the prize, it's not about me, this is a whole movement.
It's very Thatcherite in that way, because she didn't have a lot of fans either by the end of her prime ministership, and right-wing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for the last 12 years, Nicolas Maduro has been running Venezuela with increasingly tight fists. A lot of people consider him authoritarian. And do you know how he responded to Machado winning the Nobel Peace Prize?
How?
He said she's a demonic witch.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So he sounds fun.
Do you know what else he did, though?
What?
He shut down the Venezuelan embassy in Oslo right after that Peace Prize winner was announced.
Must be pure coincidence, Jez. He's probably going to do it anyway. Now, look, I mean, I think that we need to understand what's happened to Venezuela as well. So it's home to some of the world's largest oil reserves, but they've had economic collapse in recent years. Government corruption, mismanagement, and also US sanctions have led to a huge decline in oil production. Now, this is where Trump comes in, and it kind of gets interesting, because he too has been very critical of Maduro. And so when he calls Machado and congratulates her, and then she puts out a tweet thanking him. And part of the reason, Jez, that she thanked Trump was because the US has sent a naval forces to the region from Washington as a support, as a show of support. So she obviously wants to continue to lean on the US to help her and the democratic movement that she's inspired.
What do you think about that, though? Because one of the criticisms of her is that she is less a peace activist than a political operator. I found this piece in the conversation by David Smiled, who's a professor of sociology at Tulane University. And he says this: Machado is in many ways a controversial pick, less a peace activist than a political operator willing to use some of the trade's dark arts for the greater democratic good. And one of the things he points to is her promoting this discredited theory that Maduro is in control of gangs that are being used to infiltrate the United States as a way of attracting Donald Trump to her side, right? So I find this an interesting thing. Now, she's not the only controversial Peace Prize pick, obviously. So, you know, with any character in these sorts of things, you will find someone who's for them, someone who's against them.
Yep.
But I think she appears to be quite a complex player in a political system to restore democracy, even if some of her methods might be a little controversial.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to her using that information about the gangs, because obviously misinformation is a terrible thing. We've got so much misinformation about the gangs anyway. You know, that's being touted by the US president as well as others in the administration. So it's I don't know how to fathom that, but I did see that Trump and think, oh, okay, she's politically very canny.
Astute.
And you would have to be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you can say that you need to be naive and pure if you are fighting for democracy in your own country.
You know what's really interesting now? I think at the time that we're living in, with all these conflicts going on, and the hope that's rising for now a resolution between Russia and Ukraine, which Donald Trump had promised to effect.
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened
Bit
yet.
slow.
But I reckon there'll be some attention on these conflicts, these countries living under dictatorships, and who the operators are, who the change makers are in shaping up for recognition for the Peace Prize next year.
And I think the really important context for all of this, as the Nobel Peace Prize Committee made clear, is that democracies are eroding around the world. Democracies are under assault. 7 out of 10 people in the world live under some kind of autocratic rule. And there are a host of measures about what's going on. Indonesia and India and America, people kind of very anxious about it's not just the behaviour of governments, it's about the expectation of what governments can do for you. It's the lack of trust. And when there's lack of trust in authority and your institutions, then that obviously undermines the ability to enact various social programs. And that is a global phenomenon. And so this is something that we've been looking at for the Boyer Lectures this year, which is an annual series of lectures that the ABC puts on, and it's just to...
You've had your head buried in this for months, and it's been something that you've curated.
Yeah.
It's one of the highlights of Radio National's programming year, and it's about big ideas with big thinkers.
Yep. Who we are as a country, who we want to be, what makes us Australian, what makes us human. So this year we decided to look at democracy, looking at what's happening globally and the shifting alliances, the growth in misinformation, foreign interference, this kind of distrust that's growing like a fungi underneath most political discourse, contempt that other people have for others.
But also this thread of how grateful we should be to be Australians.
Exactly.
And to live in our system and how it's different. What did you learn about that? What did you explore?
Our first lecturer is Justin Wolfers. Now, he's a professor of public policy and economics from the University of Michigan, visiting professor at the University of New South Wales.
An Australian living in the States.
Yes. I called him months ago and said, if you had one big idea you wanted to tell Australia, what would it be? And he said Australia is, he didn't say freaking, but something very close to it, Jez. Australia is freaking amazing. And through everything that's happening in the US, all the roiling and the kind of like the presence of the far right, the violence, January 6th, so much that is concerning people, he is looking over his shoulder at Australia. And also with his American wife, saying what an incredible system we have. We have compulsory voting. Now, the first year that compulsory voting was brought in, so it was brought in 1924, the first election, the percentage of those who voted went from about 60% to about 90%. And it has stayed at 90% ever since. Compare that to America, where there's about roughly 60% vote in their elections. And so who are the people that don't vote? Well, those who do vote, we know, are wider, wealthier, more educated. So you have a whole group of people who are disenfranchised. We've had Lyndon B. Johnson and Barack Obama say we really should be looking at compulsory voting, and especially when it comes to the African-American population in this country. We look at what happened with Brexit. A fraction of that country voted for Brexit. We take it for granted here that we vote. We vote on a Saturday. In all the other countries, it's on, in a lot of other Western countries, it's on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. You have to get time off work.
Day.
Yeah, it's a work day.
And you have to take leave if you want to vote. Yeah.
And it's not mandated that you have to be given leave to do that. We have the secret ballot, which was called the Australian ballot, the fact that you stand there in this wobbly cardboard box and no one can tell you how to vote or force you or pay you for it, because they'll never know if you're actually going to deliver on it. We had female suffrage, the second in the world after New Zealand. We've had a lot of these very progressive parts of our democratic system which were brought in well ahead of other countries, which led us to be called a radical experiment in democracy.
How did you bridge the appreciation of democracy working for people in Australia better than it does elsewhere, when we also have disenfranchised communities here in Australia? And I think here particularly about First Nations communities. And I know this is an issue close to your heart as well. You were very mindful of this when you were curating this lecture series, that democracy is great, the Australian system is fantastic, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, and there are things to learn from that.
Yeah.
How did you bridge that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think I'll come to the question of our First Nations people in just a moment. I think the part of this series is the question of we have so much to be proud of, and it is such a great achievement, and we are incredibly, and not even just lucky, because this was deliberate. These were deliberate structures put in place. that, to have the system that we have, but that we really do need to be incredibly vigilant. I do really worry a lot about misinformation and what that does to the way people understand politics. We trust our institutions like the Australian Electoral Commission, like 9 out of 10 people trust that, but people don't trust the people that run our institutions. There's a strong belief that government officials are corrupt and so on. So I think those are things to really be careful of. The basic idea of democracy is that people have to have a sense that you are governing or ruling for them. And if there's things that you fundamentally can't do, solve social inequality, deal with the housing problem, then you erode that trust. Things like robo-debt, like massive erosion of trust with those kinds of things. Now, Larissa Behrendt was part of this series. She's a distinguished professor at the John Bunter Institute for Indigenous Research and Education at the University of Technology, Sydney. She is a lawyer and quite brilliant, I think. And on the topic of First Nations people, her argument is really to look at the fact that the formation of our very constitution, it allowed for racial discrimination amongst the states for the purposes of migration, that there is this wound that exists there and that kind of still impacts who and where we are today. But when we talk about democracy, we always talk about ancient Greece or the philosophers of revolutionary Europe, for example. What about our most ancient cultures? What is it that we could learn from the question of interdependence in a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, looking after each other, listening to country? And also she makes such a great point about the ability to rebuild. You endure a lot, but you rebuild by caring for each other.
I had the opportunity to come in and sit in the control room while you were recording the lecture, and there was one thing that she said that really, really stood out to me. And I know this is also an issue close to your heart and mine, right?
Yep.
This idea that she said about you have a very close connection in First Nations cultures of who your ancestors are, what your heritage is,
yes,
and who your descendants are, and your responsibility to legacy.
Yes.
And having that connection kind of moving that way rather than laterally in society among your contemporaries, but also to ancestry and legacy, I thought was so important, because it sort of just speaks to what a tiny dot we each of us are in handing over something, but also doing justice to what's been handed to us generationally.
And it just gets you to think about things in a whole new way, right?
Totally.
It was so clever. And look, I really encourage people to engage with this series. We also have James Curran, who's a historian from the University of Sydney, who's like, well, if the US isn't going to make our alliance a priority, what's plan B? And why is no one really talking about this? And Amelia Lester, she is looking at how artificial intelligence impacts democracy and how it could widen inequality, and which is a really fundamental part, obviously, of Australian democracy, and how we need to not just be passive recipients of it, but establish the guardrails now. Put it on Australia's terms now. Why do we just kind of import this stuff? And we also have John Anderson, who, former Deputy Prime Minister, farmer grazier, you will know him, who thinks that the spirit of the institutions are strong, but the spirit of democracy is weak, that we need better civics education, that we need to be telling a stronger version of our own history and so on.
I'm also really interested in the commonalities that emerged between quite disparate points of view and people agreeing with each other. I don't want to give too much away, but I was really struck by that. So the series really is worth watching. It's on ABC-RN, the ABC Listen app, ABC iView, broadcasting on the news channel. Really worth getting into, Jules. Congratulations.
Thanks, Jez. Jez, it's time for
Pick of the Week.
Pick of the Week. We need a special button, don't we?
We do.
Okay, so how do you go with celebrity interviews now? Do you ever...
When I do them, when I'm interviewing a celebrity, you mean?
Well, sure.
Or just watching?
Both.
Oh, if I'm interviewing someone who's really well known, I'm always kind of trying to find the new thing. I don't want to kind of just redo the interview. When I'm listening to a celebrity interview, if it's not funny and enlightening, I'm generally kind of just tune out.
There's so many bad celebrity interviews
around.
So many,
yeah. And you can see they're exhausted
you can see why.
most of the time.
Yeah, okay. And then they're like, tell us about this greatest pain, the thing that caused you most hurt in your life. Oh, good. Right. Let's go there again. Or like the cheesy thing, or like it's really hard, but when you get a really good interview, it's such a wonderful thing. Now, a lot of people in Australia love Richard Feidler and Sarah Kanowski on Conversations. Now, one show that I'm really devoted to comes out of Philadelphia. And it's called Fresh Air. And it's the interviewer is Terry Gross. She's been doing it for 50 years.
Wow.
And I love her style so much. She talks about the power of invisibility. So she doesn't do them face to face ever.
Oh, right.
She likes
this is in a radio studio and she's
in her studio and like she's just got or even I don't know if she's in her office, but like the blinds are down. She's got her headphones on and she's just listening to that person.
Wow.
And I was looking her up because I heard her do a fantastic interview about herself recently, which she never does. And she was talking about the number of people that have walked out of interviews with her. Oh. Monica Lewinsky.
Really?
And I heard that bit replayed and actually it was kind of creepy. There was so much creepy discussion around Monica Lewinsky and what you did. And I think Terry Gross said something to her like, this is not safe for work, by the way, but I won't be obscene. Anyway, she said you were sexual soulmates, but then you were performing a sexual favour on him while he was on the phone to a colleague. How could that be the case? And you can see the inappropriateness of it and not getting it, and Terry also wrestling with the fact that she did this, 30 years ago, an interview like that.
What she expressed regret about.
I think, just said the whole thing was like she never wanted to talk to her about sex at all. It was just so uncomfortable and weird. And it was a weird time in American politics. Yes. How often those things would talk about. Adam Driver walked out. He doesn't like having clips of his movies played. Weird. Bill O'Reilly walked out after being asked some challenging questions about whether he used the microphone to settle scores with people. But get this, Gene Simmons said to her, if you want to welcome me with open arms, you've also got to welcome me with open legs. Yes.
What?
I feel like he's actually said that before.
People who say things out loud are just
I know.
baffling.
So look, Sam Fragazzo did an interview with her on his Talk Easy podcast, and I really would recommend that. She really wonderful insights on Joan Didion and John Updike and Morris Sendak, who she did wonderful, of all the Where the Wild Things Are, the author of. Yep. Not long before he died, and she said, I've always been really curious about things and slightly confused by the world, and I think someone who feels that way is in a good position to be the one asking questions.
That is a great take.
Right?
100%.
That's us.
I feel that way all the time.
We should have called the podcast A Bit Confused.
But definitely not stupid.
What have you got for me?
Okay, this is a bit down market, but you talk to your dog, don't you? We've been on the phone before and you're out walking your dog and you're chatting to the dog all the time.
Yep.
So I don't keep any pets, but I was in India recently and I was struck by this moment. I was out in a city called Jodhpur and there was a guy talking to his dog in Hindi and it occurred to me, this dog understands Hindi and I don't. Like, what does this dog know that I don't? Anyway, I want to point you to an article in The Guardian. This sounds very Guardian.
Yeah.
But the title of the story is, Dogs Name Toys While Elephants Name Each Other. Animal language is more complex than we imagine.
Dogs name toys?
Yeah, apparently so. So have you seen those YouTube videos where dogs are taught to communicate with their owners? So
and they press
a twist-o-mat or a piano keyboard and each of them has a recording attached to it.
Yeah.
So if the dog hits that button, it says something back to the owner. There was one I was watching this morning. It's of a terrier who's gone viral where the dog looks at an empty packet of treats.
Yeah.
The owner says, empty packet of treats. And the dog presses the button, goes, I don't give a damn. And then the owner goes, no more treats, I'm sorry. And the dog goes, bitch. So, it does make you wonder whether,
you don't
how much
expect
does
them to be
dog
potty-mouthed.
know what they're saying? Like, does the dog know it's swearing? But certainly the expression on the dog's face matches the sound effect.
Oh, that's so good. Do you know it reminds me of that? You know that Gary Larson cartoon? And it's got like an owner talking to his dog and he's going, something like, you tore that cushion to shreds. If you don't, I'm not going to take you out for a walk. You better just behave and you're not going to get any treats. And the dog just hears blah, 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 walk, blah, blah, treats. That's all they ever focus on.
So there was a study done in the UK, like, I think, when was it? Last year. It was a poll of 2,000 cat and dog owners, and 1/3 of them said they would rather talk to their pets than actual people. Entirely believable, I think.
Yes.
But this article goes on to talk about how complex animal communication is. They say, dolphins mimic a call that's being made to them, so they respond by mimicking what they're hearing, whereas wild African elephants vocalize in particular ways with individually specific calls. So it's like they're actually using a name, saying like, hey, Dave, come over here. Look what I've got.
Yeah.
Whales communicate with clicks, as we know.
Yeah.
And I love this passage of the article because it says, the mistake, however, is to presume that animal communication is anything like ours. All too often we try to crowbar animal communication into a human-centric framework, but it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. We'll never solve the puzzle because there'll always be a fundamental mismatch. Just as cuttlefish would miss the subtlety of human sarcasm, so too humans are unlikely to ever understand the full spectrum of cuttlefish communication.
Oh, I have communicated with a cuttlefish, I believe.
Really?
Yeah,
You're one of those people. Go on. What did the cuttlefish say to you,
because
Jules?
if you go... It said, bitch. No. Get out of my way. This is my part of the reef. No, if you go up, like, if you're swimming quite close to them and you're front on and you kind of go like that, they will mimic you and go like with two of their little, they're called candles, but two of those little trunks come up and you go like that. And I did it to a baby one once too. It was like almost pure eyeball and then just little thing coming off, and it also was
And you do that
me.
and then what?
You do that and then it does that back to you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I said, democracy, what do you reckon?
Lemon juice and olive oil? No, thank you. How dare you? I've got a joke for you.
Okay.
What kind of fish is the most affectionate?
Cuttlefish.
You got it. How do you make a squid laugh?
Wait a minute. Ink. What?
You give it 10 tickles.
Oh,
Anyway, that's my pick of the week.
that's a great
silly,
dad
but
joke, sneaking
kind of-
that in there.
But kind of fun, the idea of talking to an animal, especially in Hindi, actually. I've been trying to learn
Yeah.
Spanish for years. Can't get my head around it. When, the tables and chairs start having genders, I was like,
But dogs
I'm
can.
out.
But imagine
dogs get it.
imagine if your dog could like suddenly talk and was A, deeply boring, or B, wouldn't shut up.
Had a few points of view.
Few points of view. Or it was just like, wanted to talk to you about the economy day and night, how the world's going to the pot. You're like, it's
the
so
problem
good their
with
silence.
democracy.
I don't give a damn. Good to see you, Jez.
Very nice to catch up, Jules. Don't forget, you can reach us anytime at notstupid@abc.net.au. Our producers are...
Madeline Jenner and Cinnamon Nippard.
Thanks to both of them. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you.
See you next week.
I do give a damn.